that we present. Okay, good. And we're recording this, by the way, as you probably heard. All right, we're going to go to the first slide, please. So over to your left shows the tannery site. When we formed No Clear Cuts last summer, we focused on saving the 1,800 trees on the former Davis Tannery site, which developer Jay Patry and City Hall want to clear cut. So on the right is the oak, what some people call the grandmother oak, the white oak. It's 220 years old and it's very historic. Patry wants to include that, has insisted on including that in the clear cut. But in spite of all the work we were doing in the tannery site, we soon realized that trees across the city have been or will be clear cut. So the slide on the right shows the corner of Princess Street and Sydenham Road, which Patry clear cut, almost clear cut. He left a couple of trees for token, as a token gesture. About 200 trees, including some lovely black walnuts. Next slide, please. So the slide on the right shows, okay, so the slide on the left shows what it's like now. And the slide on the right shows the cut down trees. When I went there to take these pictures, it was just tragic to see because it was a lovely forest and it improved that corner immensely. Next slide, please. Just up the road is Eunice Drive, and here we took pictures of the clear cut. The neighbors were devastated. They're experiencing more flooding. Next slide, please. On the right is Resource Road, which has just recently been clear cut. And I mean, I could go on. With the help of citizens across Kingston, we have identified 18 sites where trees have been or will be clear cut. This is especially tragic, even dangerous, as we face a climate emergency and need the cooling and other positive effects of these trees. For too long, the city has been letting profit-driven developers decide where and how they want to build and what they want to cut down. But over the past few months, as we tried to save the tannery trees, we realized that we can't just oppose destructive developments. We have to be positive and proactive, hence this meeting. We've been looking just west of the forested tannery sites to the empty land, which isn't like the tannery site, full of wildlife. This empty land that we've identified is on Montreal and Division Streets in North Kingstown. Bob McGuinness, a retired architect, is going to show us 6 areas in North Kingstown where we feel development could and should be promoted. Some of these are contaminated, but so is the tannery site, and some are zoned business industrial. But most of the tannery site is designated an environmental protection area. In other words, these zones and designations don't seem to mean much, so they shouldn't hold us up. So, and I just want to say, after Bob's presentation, we'll have questions and comments from viewers. Then Bob will show us examples of what we think can and should be built in the North Kingstown and elsewhere to provide desperately needed housing and other community features. Over to you, Bob. Bob?
Sorry, start again. Sorry, excuse, my map's gone. Okay, this is a map of the area that we're concerned about. on the right, beside the green area, is the tannery site, and the 6 areas colored in orange are the 6 areas that which are open for development and don't have a lot of trees on them. Next slide, please. I'm going to start from the south, the most southerly site, and go north. So you can see the small. This is a piece of land owned by St. Vincent de Paul Society. It's on the corner of Dufferin and Bagot Street. And the open area to the right is the area that they intend to put their new open house facility on. And the area on the left is an area which, including the car parking down below, is an area which they also own and would be a very good site for low-income housing or housing generally, but probably because it's so close to downtown, would be excellent for people who don't own cars. Next slide, please. The next piece of land is a mostly treeless piece of land at 362 Montreal Street. It's adjacent to the Kingston Family and Social Services Building and across the street from Meeeting Primary School on Patrick Street. The city owns this property, and we think it's an excellent location for housing for medium and low income families. Next slide, please. Now this shows a plot plan of this site we just talked about, and it shows a lot of street frontage and quite a lot of depth. Next slide. Thank you. So this is looking southeast, and you can see the social services building in the background. Next slide, please. And this is looking southwest along the edge of Patrick Street, and you can see how wide and how long this area could be for housing development. Next slide, please. Okay, this is so there's a plot plan and an aerial put together. This is a piece of land which is largely treeless again, and it's behind home base housing. I don't know if you know where home base housing is, but it's the black building at the bottom of the outlined red area. And this is quite a large piece of land. It is has access from a long length of Montreal Street and from 3 other streets. It's probably an ideal space for mixed housing and work and commercial space. Probably a very good place for what's needed in this area, which is a shopping center. Next slide, please. So this is an aerial view showing that there are very few trees. There are some trees in the top corner, but that some of that is not part of the site. Next slide, please. This is looking from the back of home base housing up the site towards the north. Next slide, please. And this is looking south towards home base housing. Next slide, please. The next piece of land, it's a little further up Montreal Street, down a bit. Okay, thank you. This is this land extends from Cotrochi's Specialty Foods in the south and to the Royal Canadian Legion Hall in the north. It has, and the K and P trail, you can roughly see the shroud in trees there on the west. Most of the land is free of large trees. It is owned industrial. It belongs to a local developer, Ben Pilon, but there are no development applications at present for this piece of land. It was formerly an industrial land. Next slide, please. So this shows the plot plan, and it shows that there's a piece in the middle there, which he obviously wasn't able to buy yet. But it's a fairly large piece of land and ripe for development. Next slide, please. This is from the back of Catrochi's, looking northwest, and it shows large concrete slabs left over from the industrial buildings which were once there. Next slide, please. And this shows the slabs again, but you're looking in the other direction, northwest. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the next piece of property. This is the site of the old railway station, the CN railway station. It's largely free of trees. There are some large trees, but very few. It is modestly contaminated and has no development application at present. It's quite a large piece of land. Above it, you can see to the north is Maple Street, and the area which is are surrounded by Maple Street belongs to the city and is designated as a business park. Next slide, please. Now you can see the plot plan here. The piece that belongs to CN is outlined in blue, and you can see the city central business park above. Quite a large piece of open area. Next slide, please. So this is looking, this is on the site, looking towards the northwest. Next, please. And you can see the old railway station on the right there, and you're looking towards the northeast. This is a major tragedy that we're allowing this building to just disintegrate. Wait. Next slide, thank you. So this is the last piece of land we're going to talk about. That is on Division Street. You may recognize the new Garden Chinese restaurant, which sort of stands on its own in the middle of open, cleared land. This piece of land belongs to the city, as a lot of the area does. It's just above the police station. Now, there's quite a lot of growth, tree growth on this, and so we think that the land which is on Division Street itself, along Division Street, was suitable for a mix of housing and commercial. Next slide, please. And so this is the plot plan again, and you can see all the blue belongs to the city, and the red is Amy's Taxi. Next slide, please. And this is in the rear yard of Amy's Taxi, looking at the wooded area. That's it. Thank you very much. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thanks very much, Bob. I'm sure a lot of you agree with me that there's really no excuse for this land to remain neglected when we need housing and other infrastructure. We want to go to viewers for questions and comments, but first, does anyone have any other unforested areas in North Kingstown where no development might be possible? If you do, please raise your electronic hands. Do I see any hands? Well, does anyone want to speak out or speak? Okay, so what about general questions? Does anybody have a comment or a suggestion about, or basically a comment about what Bob has just said. As we've been saying, all across the city, they're cutting down trees to build. And meanwhile, they leave acres and acres of empty land, and it's very central. It's more or less as central as the tannery land. The only reason Patry wants the tannery land is because he wants to be on the river. Well, too bad. He wants his rowing club friends to have river access. But we want ordinary people to have housing where they need it. And Patry's housing will not have any affordable housing. So the city is just going in the wrong direction. So before I move on, any comments or questions? No?
Hi, Kathleen.
Yes?
It's John Armstrong. I'm not sure how to pop into the picture here, but I'm a little surprised with all of the city-owned land. I had no idea. I'm sure there's a lot of Kingstonians who don't understand what's happening here either. The comments about Patry are quite revealing. I was wondering what was planned for that area, and your comments kind of focused me in on what's happening, which is kind of shocking. So in terms of clear cuts, yeah, you have seen what's happening, and it seems to be developer driven for sure. And the city seems to be 100% behind that. So I'm left with the question, how to deal with that.
Thanks, John. Well, I guess we see this meeting as the beginning of a conversation. So many people don't know what the city owns, and they would be shocked, like you, that they own so much land, and yet they're crying. They're saying that they have to desperately clear cut and let developers build high rises and this and that. I mean, really, it is quite shocking. So I think Bob and I think that first we should go after the city, find out about the status of that land, see what we can do, apply pressure. We should also go to Ben Pilon and say, you're sitting on very valuable, needed land. People are dying. People are homeless. They're dying. You know, something has got to give here. As I said, when we first started to try to save the tannery trees, we hadn't even thought of this either last summer. And then slowly we became aware of how wrong everything is. First, we were just saying, don't cut down the trees. And then we thought, no, we've got to promote positive development. So thanks, John. So any other questions or comments?
There's a question. in the chat.
Sharon. Sharon,
Um,
I see you.
yes, thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you for everything that you're doing. You and Vicki and everybody else who is moving this forward, because it's really necessary. It's interesting because I guess my interest rests with the trees themselves, and they are nuanced living creatures and nuanced living entities. And the thing is, I just find that the city is dealing with them in a very cavalier way, and also in a way that is quite, it lacks knowledge and it lacks intelligence. And it's interesting because I've been doing quite a lot of reading about trees, and I did mention it in the letter that I sent to the city with regard to the third dealing with it. And thank you for that too. But apparently deciduous trees help with the rotation of the earth, and conifers actually somehow deal with encourage rain. And I was thinking about that, and maybe this seems a little bit to the out of the zone, but Kingston is supposed to have the highest per capita as far the highest number of cases with regard to COVID per capita. And I was just thinking, you know, it would be really interesting to see whether or not that was a result of a lack of oxygen, a lack of breathable oxygen in the air. And it would be interesting to see if there are any studies around the world which actually measure the relevance of the incidence of COVID and the proliferation of it, and the number of trees that exist in the area. And Finland is an excellent example of where that could occur, because the thing is, they treasure their trees, and whether it's in Helsinki or in the north, and they are one of the most treed areas in the world still.
Yeah.
And we're just cutting ours down. Anyway, that's my comment. Thank you.
Well, I think most of you know that trees purify the air, they prevent flooding, they prevent soil erosion, they're good for mental health. I mean, they're needed in our society if we're going to have a healthy society. Someone, Mary Farrar asked in the chat, how to combine saving trees with affordable housing. Well, Mary, I think Bob can say something, but we're saying build where there are no trees, build affordable housing where there are no trees. And there do seem to be a lot of areas that have that potential. Jill Aslan, do you want to say anything? In the interest of full disclosure, she's my sister. Yeah, do you want to say anything? Unmute.
Unmute my audio. Okay. Am I there now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm new and I'm proud to be Kathy's sister. And I just wanted to say, first of all, that in Toronto, where I used to live, I was part of saving at least 80 old willows on the waterfront in Toronto, right beside Palais Royal in the 80s. And it was a huge effort, but it worked. And the way they did it is, maybe some of you know, is instead of making a parking lot beside the Palais Royal for the people who were fixing it up, so to speak, they made it as a median parking lot in the middle of the Lakeshore and the Gardner. But anyway, that worked. So it does work. The efforts can come to fruition.
Thanks,
And
Jill.
the trees should be the focus. I mean, I think what I'm seeing, I'm new, and I'm not trying to be anything. It's just that I think there should be focus, not like spreading out over housing and all of that. But I think the trees are the most important, and none of the alternates that we showed or you showed are on the waterfront. And so I was wondering if the developer is trying to build high-end waterfront, which would be a whole different deal, or is there supposedly a low income, which
No.
usually
Thanks.
there's a mix, but
Thanks, Jill. He wants waterfront property. It's not going to be affordable, as I said. And but we're saying we want affordable non-waterfront property, and we also want to save the tannery site. So somebody, thanks very much, Jill.
The tannery site is huge and important. And today in the Star, there was a article about Canada being sort of focused on the heat waves that are going to start taking place. And Kingston was actually named as one of the places where it's going to be the worst. And one of the sort of alternatives or suggestions that the study showed was to have more trees, more shady areas for people to go to save their lives and go into the shade by the water. And that is a huge, huge thing. And to
Jill,
me.
Jill, we
focusing on
need
the
to move
trees
on to
yeah,
other
is-
people. Sorry, we need to move on to other people. Thank you. Somebody else asked, can we ask the city to put city-owned empty space on their GIS maps? Is there a counselor or somebody who could answer that? How about my favorite counselor, no offense to any others here, Lisa Osanek. Lisa has done amazing work trying to save trees and letting us know what's happening.
Yeah,
So
thanks
what
for,
do you-
yeah, thanks so much, Kathleen. Thanks for letting me be in this meeting. So yeah, I see that from Carrie in the chat. And so I will send that off to our staff tonight. And Bob, if you want to give me just send me the copy of the map. I want to ask staff about those 6 areas right away. Now for the one at the social services location, 362 Montreal Street, it happens I was talking to Bridget Doherty just yesterday before going into a council meeting and saying it's got a gigantic parking lot on St. Patrick's Street, right? And we should make that a high rise. And she was saying the problem with North Kingstown is the density of, a lot of low income housing already in that area and how we have to spread it out. So I don't know if staff would use that as the same excuse, but I'm willing to, get staff's opinion on it for sure. For the clear cuts, woodlands, Kathleen's exactly right, 18, it's just horrible right now. John Armstrong knows about everything over on Resources Road. It's just so bad. But the only woodlands that are deemed to be protected are significant woodland. And that's not the city, that is the province. It's under the Planning Act and the provincial policy statement. So unless a woodland is categorized as a significant woodland, all the other woodlands, there's nothing that the city has in its power to protect woodlands that are not significant. To be classified as significant woodland, there's 5 criteria set out by the province. And if a woodland doesn't meet, 5 of those 5 criteria, they're not protected either. It really comes to the province. We need, woodlands never get the airtime at provincial elections. Here we have an election in 1 month time on June 2nd. And even if we can get Doug Ford out of the government, right, then we still have to get the Liberals and the NDP on board to put some good strength into the woodlands that are not significant, that are all these ones that have come down behind the Tim Hortons on Sydenham and Princess, 2274 Princess Street, or the one out my way, Forest Hill Drive. They're all contributory woodlands, and there's no protection for them at all from the province. The developer could bring that to the appeal court and it would be overturned in favor of the developer. So it's just a really sad situation out there. And we've just, all of our woodlands seem to be privately owned, which is why we're in this big problem right now.
It sure is. Thank you very much, Lisa. I think Jim Brown had his hand up. Jim?
Hi, that's great. Nice work there, Bob. And Lisa, some excellent comments. There are a few things I didn't know about the woodlands, different categories. It strikes me that we have some areas in town that, and there are areas in the world where it's a beautiful place to live, a beautiful place to walk. It's very inviting. It's nice to spend time around, and there's a nice balance between the living area and the green area, whether it's a park or it's a tree-lined boulevards, etc. And you have what, 42 participants. What do we got? 40-something neighborhoods. You can almost send somebody out to each neighborhood and just take a look around and find the ones that you feel are the absolute best that we've done in Kingston. And go further than that, look at a few other countries. Somebody mentioned Finland, and I think Sweden did a pretty good job too. and put up the ones that are worth shooting for in terms of a positive model. Certainly, we've got some pretty lonely looking parks out there with Charlie Brown trees on them, but I think we need to have in front of us the kind of look that we want to see. And with the technology, gee, you can map this stuff. You can map who the owners are. You can build some bridges and conversations. You can map where the parks are, where the beautiful areas are, and the areas that are going to need a little bit of help. So I think Kathleen, I really applaud you for putting all the energy behind this, and along with everybody else, this is really has to be out front and center. The climate crisis is going a lot faster than anybody else can move right now.
Yeah, thank you very
That's all I
much.
want to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. We do have contacts in a lot of areas. I mean, I now know people near Eunice Drive and the Walnut Grove and Wright Crescent, and they're the ones, and including John Armstrong, who have been, we've formed, I was going to speak about this at the end as an action thing, but we've formed the Citizen Tree Watch / Count, and we're going to try to get people reporting in. And that's how we found out about, well, Lisa told us about Clogs Road, where they're cutting down more than 2,000 trees. The one on Bath Road, where they've cut down. We were hearing from either Dear Lisa or citizens. And I think that will grow as word spreads. But as I said, it's already working. Someone put on Vision for Kingston that they saw the Bath Road clear cut. So people are watching in a way I don't think they were before. Either it's that it's just become so extreme, or people, I think it's a bit of both, and people are becoming aware and going, oh no, not another one. So is there anyone else who'd like to, there were some things in the chat, is there? Yeah, somebody asked about a link to the groups. Well, we're working on that. But most people are on our mailing list. So, okay, well, if there are no questions, I want to thank you for your participation. Before we move to the next part of the meeting, I'd like to share 2 slides that outline what a livable city is and needs. Now, I think this is important because I think, yeah, on the left, I think we're forgetting, or we just haven't been made aware. We've seen so much destruction, and Williamsville, the high rises with no parkettes. We're just getting used to a non-livable city. So these 10 points are from the New Urbanist website, and you might find that interesting to go to. So first, walkability. This means that most needs are met within a 10-minute walk of home and work. Street design is friendly and safe for pedestrians. Streets have lots of trees. They are narrow, which slows traffic dramatically. Connectivity, number 2, an interconnected street grid disperses traffic and encourages walking. No dead ends or wide, dangerous intersections. 3, mixed use and diversity. I think this is something we aren't seeing enough of. Neighborhoods, blocks, and buildings offer a mix of shops, offices, and homes. The neighborhood welcomes people of all ages, income levels, cultures, and races. 4, mixed housing. Zoning allows the close proximity of a wide range of housing types, sizes, and prices. 5, quality architecture and urban design. I don't think we're seeing much of that. Buildings emphasize beauty and comfort and establish a sense of place. Public spaces establish an attractive quality public realm. Next, the slide on the right, okay. Traditional neighborhood structure. Neighborhoods have definite centers and borders, a real sense of a neighborhood. With public spaces near the center, there is a sense of belonging. 7, increased density. Buildings, residences, shops, and services are close together to make walking more convenient, services and resources more efficient, and living areas more enjoyable. Smart transportation, which we hear a lot about, but don't have much of. A network of high quality electric public transit connects neighborhoods, while pedestrian-friendly design encourages more use of bicycles, rollerblades, scooters, and walking. Sustainability, the community respects natural systems and eco-friendly technologies like energy efficiency. And finally, they all add up to quality of life. These design principles produce a life that is well worth living by providing places that enrich, uplift, and inspire the human spirit. So I think that sums it up. So I love these. So I'm now going to talk about the missing middle. Next, first slide, please.
Just give me a sec. I have to go find it.
Oh, okay. Okay, well, first I'll say, before we start the next part of the meeting, I'd like to share 2 slides that I just did, sorry. There are a lot of new terms in the development world, such as missing middle and soft or gentle density. Partly, they are a reaction to urban sprawl with single-family houses on fertile farmland, and also to high rises. Kingston has done too much of both. So first slide, please, here it is. This is the missing, what is now being called the missing middle. We all know older neighborhoods where there are duplexes, tri and fourplexes, multiplexes, and 6-story apartment buildings. According to some, middle also means price, but in North Kingstown, we want to make truly affordable social housing available. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show these lovely examples. I mean, they're so livable looking. All right, the next slide, please. As I said, North Kingstown and other parts of the city need soft density. Okay, over to you again, Bob.
Thank you, Kathleen. Before I start on this, I want to send a message to Kathleen's sister. You referred to an article which highlighted a situation in Kingston with where we were going to experience much higher temperatures than we do at the moment. I very much appreciate you sending that to us, please, if you're still listening. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Kathleen. What I am going to try to do now is to show you some of the things we put together to help you explain what your vision is, because this is what the title is, it's your vision, but we're going to show you a little bit of our vision first, and with the hope of stimulating the conversation. This first slide is something which is put together, and a lot of the ideas that we're going to put together before you today is by an architect, a Scottish architect working in Denmark. He's written a book called Soft City, and he explains how you can make a city much more livable. And his ideas were developed mostly by another Dane whose name is Jan Gell, and he's an academic and he's working in the US. So we'll try to give you those references at the end. We are not urban planners, but we feel new ideas are needed as Kingston intensifies. This is our attempt to start an important conversation about how to develop housing and other buildings on a human scale and as green as possible. We look forward to your feedback after this presentation. Next slide. Oh, so this slide I wanted to explain. It's you can see it's my Lego blocks, but they're not actually mine. Anyway, they show 4 different ways of building. Now, the one at the top, the left side, that is 4 sort of 4 or 5 or 6 story buildings with courtyards in the middle. The next one over to your right, that shows the same, about 4 or 5, 6 stories with one large courtyard. And then the one down below is that, single walled buildings. And the bottom in the right-hand corner is the point block, the skyscraper. Now, all of these buildings, each one has an equal number of Lego blocks. So you could see each Lego block as a dwelling, for instance, okay? And so that they are all equal in density. These days, most proposed high-rise construction is not surrounded by green areas, as it might be in the bottom picture there with the point rise building, but they have a podium in the front, with 3 to 7 story podium. And so there's very little green space around them. And this is the theory, is that you reduce the impact of the high-rise building if you have lower buildings in front. But the high-rise is still there when you move away. That's short distance. Anyway, so most high-rise buildings are not very conclusive to happy living from studies that have been done. Next slide, please. Now, the favored form in that last slide was blocks, 4 blocks, with the interior courtyard. And this is a typical nicely built building in Denmark with a nice courtyard in the middle. The advantages of having a courtyard is that the air inside is much cleaner. There's a very safe place for children and everybody else to live in and play in, being much overlooked. And it provides shared space for everybody to use. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a building. I think it's in Denmark, but not sure. And it's extremely successful. This is one of the most successful developments in recent years in this particular town. And it shows what we call mixed use, where you have a lot of commercial on the ground floor, and you probably have offices on the next floor, and you have on the upper floors, you have housing. And it is right on a square, which is extremely well used. And you can see that there's a lot of participation here. The fellow in the bottom corner is the architect, David Sim, and he's introducing us to this. Next slide, please. So this is very interesting schematic. It's highly speculative, but it shows medium-rise mixed-use proposal in China. And this is the big open courtyard scheme. And it shows some very interesting things. You'll notice that most of the buildings have solar collectors on them. That there's quite a variety of different heights of buildings, especially on the corners. There are bigger buildings on the corners, and there are smaller buildings in the middle, and there are gardens in the middle and gardens on the roofs of the houses. The whole area is surrounded by tree-lined avenues. Looks pretty nice to me. Next slide. Okay, this is a diagram, and this is a cut through a building, and it shows again the concept of mixed use. On the bottom floor, there's a basement area, and that is mostly for recreation. The next floor is for commercial use. The next floor is for business, and the top 3 floors are housing. And this also shows a very interesting principle of stepping back the size of each floor so you have less impact on your neighbors. Next slide, please. This is a architect sketch. Sometimes they're overambitious, and sometimes they're deceptive. But this shows a very interesting principle. this is when you have a park or a recreational area, you should try not to put cars along it, because if you put cars on the others, you can see the 4-story buildings there with mixed uses. You put the cars on the other side, then everybody has access to that safely, that recreational space. Next slide, please. This is another sketch of a internal street, pedestrian street. And this is a form which is being favored in many cities now, and we have some in Montreal. And what happens here is the cars are on the outsides of the buildings again. So there's an internal street, and then there are cars on either side of these buildings. Next slide, please. So this is a designed by Hobbin Architecture. This is a very well received architect from Ottawa, and he's showing what Kathleen was illustrating, middle rise housing, and how it could be, how you can have a mix, like he's got low rise apartments and different forms, back-to-back townhouses and so on. This is the landscaping and so on slows down the traffic, and even though there are cars in the area, it's clear that pedestrians have the right of way. Next slide, please. So now, this is another portion of this talk, which I wanted to bring forward because we don't have enough geared to income housing in Kingston, and we don't seem to be building it. And other parts of the world do it really well. And the way they do it is they have mixed incomes, all in one building. They don't try to just put all the low income people in one building and next middle incomes in another and high incomes, and it's very much mixed. And so I'm going to show you a bunch of social housing. This is a social housing. I'm sorry, I can't remember where it is. And it's 4-story, but the feature which is really nice, apart from it's quite an interesting design, is that it has huge balconies. And that is very important when you're designing a housing which is livable, because most people who live in dense situations don't have their own private space, outdoor space. So let's give them a place where they can enjoy growing things and sitting out. Next slide, please. Now this is I think this is in Spain. And this illustrates, again, very large balconies, but was kind of interesting feature. It's only 4 or 5 stories, 5 stories high, but it has this very interesting glass balconies, which are covered with leaves. So it looks kind of decorative. Next slide, please. So this is in Slovenia, as you can see. This is low income housing, and it is very cheap materials, but large balconies, lots of nice color, and intricate design, which it's not just flat. Thank you. Next slide, please. This is a development in London, England. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because you can see on the right-hand side what many developments are absolutely flat on the surface and make no interest. Well, this shows balconies sticking out, different heights of the buildings. So so it makes it much pleasanter as a streetscape. This is social housing again, but it's mixed incomes. Next slide, please. So this is your typical, wall housing all the way along a street. It's 4 stories to 5 stories high, but it has a very nice feature, which is a garden space on the roof. And it even has a greenhouse in the middle there, you can see it. And so this gives people a shared recreational space away from traffic. And so kind of interesting way of providing for some green space within a very dense city. I think are that all the slides? Yes. Okay. So before we go into the next slide, I'd just like to make some quick points. Where was that? The previous buildings are probably not ideal, but they illustrate the following. Urban housing can be dense, but must show respect for human scale and social interaction. Medium-rise, high-density housing can offer more affordable opportunities for a mix of low and middle-income families. Denser housing is preferable because we face the climate emergency. Shared walls, floors, and ceilings reduce heat loss and heat gain. We need to reduce car use, especially near downtown, and increase public transit and make cycling much safer. So that is part of the urban planning design, which needs to be facilitated by the city and by the developer. The province and City Hall are moving ahead with intensification. Forested land is being clear-cut almost daily across the city, and unattractive high-rises are being promoted in our historic downtown. There are many attractive, green, livable ways to add density. Thank you for your time. I look forward to questions and comments. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thanks very much. Lots of food for thought. It just shows you what wonderful things are being done around the world and in Montreal, Ottawa. I mean, there is I've seen a few nice developments in Kingston, but I've always really liked, and I know it's townhouses, but what they did in near the Portsmouth Olympic Harbor, those little townhouses really blend in with the area and are very human scale. I mean, we can't always do that because we need more density, but it shows what you can do if you're not too greedy and you're imaginative. So I just wanted to say, does anybody have any comments about what Bob, or questions about what Bob said, about Bob's slides? I mean, it really is just to show us that there are lots of ways to develop a city. If not, I'm thinking that one of the things we need to do is, when we look at North Kingstown, is to look at the needs, the wants and needs of the people of North Kingstown. And we hope to have the meeting in the Legion. And Bob and I took the poster to various stores and businesses along Montreal Street. But of course, we had to go virtual, so we had to sort of tell them not to show up. But is there anyone who would like to speak about some of the wants and needs of North Kingstown? Okay. Meanwhile, Kelly has her hand up. Kelly. Kelly? Hello? Josh, do you want to try first?
Sure.
You unmuted?
I believe I'm unmuted.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I'm going to leave my camera off just because I have trouble with the internet. So I want to save bandwidth. I just want to say, so first off, I wanted to really thank Bob and Kathleen for pulling this all together and pulling everybody together. I'm looking forward to discussions about action items coming out of this. I think the one point that I did seem to not be able to keep myself from making, as anybody who may have looked at the comments would have seen, is that the one thing that I do think is really important is that we talk not just about densification, but that we talk about it in terms of minimizing greenhouse gases, as well as increasing biodiversity and just living space. Cities, I would argue, are not just for humans. And I think that's a perspective that's important. I also think I volunteer, as does Bob, and I know Kathleen, you've been there, and also with Little Forest Kingston, and Little Forest Kingston is trying to push the idea that from any window you should be able to see 3 trees, that we should have a canopy cover of at least 30%, and that within 300 meters there should be a green space that's accessible. My own personal belief is that some of those green spaces could include, green roofs and large balconies that would be accessible as well. So I think I just wanted to say thank you for pulling this all together. I certainly agree with the ideals represented by what Bob was saying about having more livable space that includes mixed use, that includes mixed income. But I do want to just kind of emphasize that I think it's really, really important that development deal is overtly accounting for the need for more green corridors, as Mary mentioned, and that we really need to limit greenhouse gases, and that means that development needs to take that into account as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Lisa, you've got your real hand, not
I
your.
know, for some reason, I can't
It
figure
works.
out how to put up my hands. Like everybody else doesn't seem to have a problem, but I can't figure it out. So I just wanted to say for the 4-story high building idea, right? They have 3 developments out in the West End that planning staff are calling stacked townhomes. So they're 4-story buildings. The bottom 2 floors would be like a 2-story house, like a 2-story townhouse that one person owns. So like the ground floor and then the 2nd story. And then it's like another townhouse on top of that townhouse, which would be owned by another family, which would be the 3rd floor and the 4th floor. So you're going to see a lot of reference to stacked townhomes at planning committee meetings coming, like on future developments. And that's what it is. It's 4 stories. It's a 2-story townhouse within another 2-story townhouse on top of it. And I have 2 of them in my district in the Bay Ridge area. So that's why I'm familiar with those developments. And back to North Kingstown, and I don't know if Rob Hutchinson is still on. I just don't see his video, but one thing that we have to consider too in the future is that Wellington Street extension from Rideau Street and north, right? Because for some of those 6 areas that we talked about for possible housing, like Ben Pilon's area and Hickson Avenue, just for all of us to consider, do we want the Wellington Street extension to be totally annexed, or do we want it to go, like north of Railway Street through? Like, I don't know. I don't want more trees to go, but that could open up development, or that could be bad development. I'm not sure, but the city wants it to go through. So that will be after the North Kingstown secondary plan finally, comes in its final form and gets approved.
That's a good heads up. Very good heads up. And yes, there are diverse housing projects around town. One of the problems is, though, that some of them are really poorly built. What I found with Bob's presentation was that even though some of those were social housing, they were beautiful. I didn't like the colorful one in Slovenia, but that's my taste. But it does show that you can do a lot with cheaper materials and some decent taste. You're not just building a box. And that seems to be what people are doing. I'd like to ask Wendy to speak because she knows the area better than most of us. Wendy Veit or Wendy?
Hi,
Hi.
Kathleen. Thank you very much. I just wanted to get back to your question about need in the area and a couple of points just for context. So when we look at the Rideau Heights community and many families in Inner Harbor as well, I think a couple of points of note. One, the Rideau Heights community, the social housing project there is really a 70-year-old urban planning mistake where all that social housing was put in one area. And many aspects of that neighborhood were actually, it historically was, and I'm sure some of you know this, that it was a shanty town and before the 401 was built, so the 401 came through and people had to relocate. But we are at Kingston Community Health Center still serving families who are the descendants of families who came from England and Ireland and other countries to build Fort Henry and Queens and the Rideau Canal. And so we are in many cases dealing with multi-generational poverty. And part of the tragedy of that is families who have lived in social housing for multiple generations and have not been able to break that cycle. And sadly, the conditions in the housing are quite dire. So there's mold on the walls. We have youth in living in basements and large families congested in very small houses with poor heat. And the need is tremendous. And there are well over 1,000 people on the waiting list for social housing. There's particularly a shortage for 1-bedroom apartments. And I worry so much especially for the children and youth, which is primarily where my focus is at KCHC, where there's very little hope in some cases just because of the living arrangements. And we also see families very challenged where, say a family has young children and those children age out at the age of 18 and suddenly that family's income drops because, and their housing support, because once the children become 18 and move out, there's less income support for that family. So then parents are actually asked to move to a smaller unit, which is very difficult, and then the waiting list. So it does create this very sad cycle. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context and around the need for housing, but also around the need for green spaces. There is no community swimming pool in the area. So the need for shade for children and youth and having green spaces to escape the heat that was certainly mentioned earlier, and having access to the waterfront and some of just the need for trees for quality of life for everyone. So at Kingston Community Health Center, we're trying very hard to break that cycle of poverty, and we receive a tremendous amount of support, certainly from the city of Kingston and folks here and many generous donors and other levels of government besides the municipality. And we're very, very grateful for that, but there is so much more work to do.
Well, Wendy, when I saw you were on, I was hoping you'd speak up. Thanks very much, because I knew you'd really give us some perspective and some frontline reality. No, it's tragic. And then one of your colleagues at the Integrated Care Hub was talking about the opioid deaths. I mean, we're on this Zoom webinar, and I see it, as I said before, as just the first step to broadening. I mean, I don't think some of us from 350 Kingston, the climate change group, have ever talked to Wendy or maybe Josh at Little Forest. So I think we are coming together. It's just that, as you say, a lot more has to be done. So I see this as the first step. And I'd like to stay in touch with you, Wendy, just to see how we can bring the community in, especially post-COVID, if there ever is such a thing. Okay, are there any more questions or comments? Let me see in the chat.
Kathleen, I would like to speak at some stage.
Go ahead. Well, I don't see any other comments, so why don't you say something?
Okay, so
Now,
I'm wondering if you could, Vicky could bring up the map again. I want to make some points related that I didn't get a chance to make. Is that possible, Vicky? Ah, there it is.
done. Great.
Okay, so what I wanted to show is this is a very, very, no, back to the. There it is. There, thanks. When you look at this map, it's amazing how much green space there is. There's no other place in the city with this much green space. Partly because Bell Park now exists as a park which for access to everybody, just rather than just a golf course. So it's a great foundation from which to develop because you provided people with this wonderful waterside and this beautiful park, and it's thousands of people should be able to use it. The other thing is that this is an area, I live fairly close, which is undergoing very rapid gentrification. And so there won't be a problem with too much social housing. It just doesn't happen that way. We will have to fight for every piece of social housing that goes into this area because, you know, people with money won't be looking for that kind of development. So, and the third thing I wanted to say is that the best forms of development are what's called mixed development, you know, where you have all of the, where you work and you live and you recreate and you shop all in one block. And we don't develop that way, and we need to insist that we develop that way. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob. We can't say it often enough that we just need it to be less monocultural. As we all know, cities in the past were done so that you had an industry and work in one part of the town, and then housing in another, and then shopping in another. I know my daughter works in London, and we spend half our time driving from one thing to the other. And Kingston is a bit like that, but certainly downtown has been preserved a bit better. So any other comments or
Kathleen,
questions?
Bill Jennings,
Yes,
if I could make a comment, if you think it appropriate.
sure.
I just wanted, and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've not been a long time member of the group and involved in any of your discussions. I have met some of you downtown on the corner of Princess and King, I guess it was, and had some conversations, signed your petition. And I agree entirely with your concerns and all of the points that you've made regarding the trees and the proper way to develop livable neighborhoods that you focused on. However, I do believe that there is not only are your points very valid, but even more so than you may realize, because they apply not just to clear cutting trees in large areas for new development, I don't think, but rather they now will shortly, unless some change is made, will apply to every residential neighborhood and any individual lot in the city. And I've sent some details about this to Kathleen, and perhaps she could pass them on to you, but I can summarize with her permission a very quick summary of my points, if that's okay. Is that all right with you,
Sure.
Kathleen? All right.
Sure, but yeah.
In fact, I've written this stuff down so I can do it fast. Okay, my basic message is that on April the 26th, City Council will decide whether the new zoning bylaw will be passed. A section that is of particular concern to me is 5.4.6 in that new zoning bylaw. It will allow 1 or 2 additional residential units to be built on any urban residential property with few limitations. The general public, I don't think, has got any clue about what the consequences of this could be. If passed, it will likely apply to where you live now. I checked with my counselor and know that it certainly applies in all of my neighborhood, which is Strathcona Park. You know, I'm not going to be building anything in my backyard, but I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 neighbors that I can see out my back window here. And I would think that within a fairly short time, at least 1 or 2 of them will be selling. And if this is passed, I think what's going to happen is that the neighboring property, once sold, by these bylaw changes, the buyer is going to be encouraged, those who want to buy it as an investment, not to live in it, like most of us do, but as an investment, will be encouraged by this new legislation to add up to 2 more residential units on the site. Now, there are some limitations. Perhaps the most significant I've been able to find out anyway is limiting this expansion to or the total number of bedrooms on any one lot at 8. But that has already been sent for adjudication to the Ontario, Labor Tribunal, which, you know, may be waiting for council to pass this so that can then disallow it. I hope not, but that may be the case. Anyway, I think it's really important. I don't think that the council necessarily wants this to happen. It's more pressure from above and from the development community that's bringing it, and the general public knows nothing about it. The concern that was raised most recently by the people in Wright Crescent area, different in nature to this particular section, didn't have anything to do with these additional residential units, but it just kind of shows that nobody's known about this kind of development, though it's gone on for 5 years at least. There's been plenty of so-called public notification on the city's website with the publication of all of the reports, and, you know, all the meetings are, or most of them anyway, are available online. But that's not how the public works. And they only get concerned when, you know, it's of direct concern to them, as it should be. That's what we elect our council to do, is to protect us to some degree from, you know, bad development, what I would call bad development in this case. There's not much we can do because this is going to city council on the 26th, but I think we can act in support of those on city council who at least see this danger, because, and I think we should encourage them to delay the passage, and in delaying it, try to, in their way, by drawing attention to it, educate the public. Because if you can make it into a broad issue rather than a general or specific interest issue, and there are many, many specific interest groups that I think could be involved in this, then I think we might have a chance to make some progress. And as a final point, I'd like to thank Lisa Osanek for expressing the frustration I'm sure was felt by many of the council members and members of the planning committee about the way in which this was, to use her words, being rubber stamped. The council is being asked to rubber stamp this, and I don't think they should. Thank you. Sorry.
Thanks.
Mel.
Thanks very much, Bill. The council's being forced, I think, to rubber stamp a lot. For example, if I'd like to hear from you, Lisa, but I just want to say that Paige Agnew, one of the city's commissioners, high up commissioners, basically told the city, the councilors, that if they voted against the clear cut at Walnut Grove, it would go to the LPAT and the city would lose. So they were more or less threatened into voting for that. And I know several of them didn't want to vote for that clear cut. So there are a lot of ways of, I'm calling it bombarding and bamboozling. They're being the city councilors are being bombarded with one thing after another, one project, one issue, one report, lots of reports, and then they're being bamboozled by, well, for example, the tree count. We found out that the tree count, any trees under 6 inches weren't being counted, whereas saplings, newly planted saplings, are being counted. That's a complete distortion. So we really have to, and that was exposed mainly by Lisa. And then the public spoke up as well. And it's really quite frightening. Anyway, over to you, Lisa.
Right.
Or I was assuming
Yeah.
you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just want to talk, so Bill, I'm going to verify that like with staff tonight, but for the backyard accessories, it's my belief, I put it in the chat because it's the provincial government is doing royal assent for a lot of bills, right? Without even waiting for any public input, or they get the public input just to say they get the public input, and they're ramming through a lot of things. And I believe the accessory structures in the backyards, right, is all municipalities, like it's become law that those things are allowed. In like if you just do a quick Google, Hamilton's complaining, Aurelia's complaining, like right across the province. And I think this is another example where the provincial government has just allowed it. I know too, right before COVID, that they're now allowing all homes to have not just one secondary suite in their home, but up to 2 others. So you can have 3 secondary suites in your house as of right. And so I think the accessories in the backyard is one of them. And I totally share the concern that all of us have, because if you have a big backyard with lots of trees and you get someone moving into the house and then they want to have like 2 granny suites in there for rental income. And when you actually watch like HGTV, Home and Garden Network, you know, they advertise that all the time as like, oh, buy this big house and this is your, you know, how you can afford your mortgage payments because you can rent out the granny suite. But I'm going to verify that tonight, and I'll send staff's reply to Kathleen, and then Kathleen, you could forward it to everybody on this call tonight.
Sure, great, thank you. I mean, getting back to the whole premise of our meeting, we want densification, we want intensification, but we don't want it at the expense of neighborhoods or forests. And right now, that seems to be it, that there's no sort of middle ground or no sensitivity. So that's another reason we're suggesting that these empty spaces be built so that they won't be saying, we need this, we need to build this high rise, and we need to densify these neighborhoods. If we can try to say, let's redirect our plans to intensify, that would be helpful. So, and thanks again, Bill, for the scary heads up. So any more, has anybody else said anything? Okay, well, I think we could close, it's been an hour and a half, but I'd just like to, can we have the last slide, please? here's a, okay, there. Okay, so this is actions you can take. A lot of you already know this, but I'll go over it anyway. You can write to mayor and council with the ampersand at cityofkingston.ca. That makes it very easy. And you could also copy Tim Park at cityofkingston.ca. He's the head of director of planning. It's always good to copy John Bologna, or however you pronounce it. He's the city clerk, and so he will officially register whatever you write. So that never that never hurts. And if you have any urban planning, architectural, engineering experience, we'd really like to hear from you. Either Robert here, Bob here, or me. If you could take a picture of this slide, it would be helpful. And then, as I said, we started the Citizens Tree Watch /count. And people are reporting clear cutting from out on Bath Road to Resource Road. And so please contact me if you, and then the last one was, we have an online petition on change.org, and that's under Stop the Kingston Clear Cut. And we've almost got 2,000 names. So, and then we have more than 2,000 names on hard copy. Now, I'm not sure if what the city thinks of change.org petitions, but we are almost at 2,000, so that's good. Although I looked at some of the names and wondered where they were from. But if you could, and also we're usually out at Princess and Wellington every Friday. Bob and I are both with 350 Kingston, the climate crisis group. But I'm usually there with and they're there with their signs about the climate crisis, but I'm usually there with our petition. And the good news is that a lot of people are signing it. I would say 65% or even 70. Lately, they weren't very good in the winter, but now people are really, really upset. I think, again, the awareness is growing, and so we just have to take advantage of that awareness and keep the snowball rolling. So if any of you have any other suggestions about actions, please contact me. And here's somebody who wants to be added to the mailing list. Okay, great. And does anybody have any final thing to say? No? Okay, I'm just copying.
Oh, Kathleen, can I just add one more action people can take? So just
Yeah.
please, everyone, remember the June 2nd election, and every candidate that comes to your door between now and June 2nd, ask them that we need legislation to protect the secondary woodlands, right? Our contributory woodlands. We need more, because right now, those woodlands, those smaller woodlands have no protection at all from development. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, I must say that I'm going up to Halliburton to help a Green Party MP, the MPP, a candidate, because there's a chance that he might beat a conservative. So that's where I'll be. So anybody who can get away and beat a conservative somewhere, please do. I don't think in our neighboring ridings there's any hope, but or even north of us. But if you can go somewhere where there's hope, even help the Liberals or the NDP. I think we've had enough of the thug Ford government, as far as I'm concerned. Okay, so thank you all very much. As I said, again, this is just the start. We wanted to get a sense of what people were feeling. We wanted to get new ideas, new energy, and I hope you feel that it was a good first step. Thanks very much. And I think people heard us say Vicky. Thanks to Vicky Schmolka for her technical wizardry.
You're welcome, but I wasn't much of a wizard, I'm afraid.
Well, better than I would have done. For sure.
Thank you. Good
Okay,
night.
thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. You're wonderful.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
My
We'll be
pleasure.
in touch. We'll be in touch.
Thank you, Gavin. We couldn't have done it without you.
Oh, yes, Gavin Hutchison deserves credit as well, but he's not here. Mhm. Well, I'm going to go and eat my cold pierogies.
Well done, Kathleen. Thank you. And Bob too. That was, I think, very eye-opening for people.
Do you think so?
I think they said so.
Yeah, a few people,
So
definitely. Yeah. And thank goodness Lisa was here. She's so great. And I think Wendy just added the details. I mean, I hate to use the word color, but, or the reality. So few of us know how people are living up there in that housing estate.
well, and it's
I
not
remember,
all like that up there, right? It's a mixed community too, but it's going to be gentrified next.
Mary,
Yeah.
how was
Yeah.
it?
No, I thought it was great. I thought there was a lot of good participation. I found the slides, I mean, as my comment sort of indicated, it was a little confusing. The pictures of the actual locations, had trees in them, some of them.
Yes.
So that was kind of confusing, like, are you on the side of the trees or on your side of the housing? That was just a little bit of initial, I was a little bewildered about that. But, I think it definitely came through and everybody totally understanding that you're wanting to do both. And you said we wanted on land without trees, and I
Right.
think that's clear. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I don't think there was a problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
Good.
mean, that
Yeah,
land
Mary,
beside-
we
Oh,
we
sorry.
did fail a little bit there because we could show, some of the pieces of land that we were showing had trees on them. So we should have said,